How's it going, friends? My name is Fringy, it's July 25, and welcome to System Update for the week's gaming news and discussion. So this announcement really came out of left field, let me tell you. DICE VP Carl Magnus Trodensen wrote a blog post where it was announced that Battlefield Hardline had been delayed until early 2015. Apparently, this delay was done to ensure the game is actually done when it releases. They also want to make improvements to both multiplayer and single player. This came from DICE, so my earlier speculation that DICE were working on this game were true. So to all the fuckfaces telling me that I was wrong in my Battlefield Hardline rants, there you go, you just got proven wrong by the VP of DICE. But back to the matter at hand. I gotta say that this is good news. There have been a lot of delays that have annoyed me just because they don't make sense to me. But this one seemed logical. I mean, if you played the Battlefield Hardline beta, everybody will tell you that it was severely underwhelming. It was the same thing. But what this announcement does prove to me at least is that this game has not been in development for 3 years like they said it has. I'm of the opinion that if you're not making a game that runs on a new engine, or you're not developing a new engine for a game, 3 years is the maximum amount of time you need to make that game. And I think most people will agree with me. But Battlefield Hardline, you can't tell me they've been working on that game for 3 years. There's no way. It reuses assets from Battlefield 4. A game that's been in development for 3 years is reusing assets from Battlefield 4, and you're trying to tell me that this is a new game. Everybody said it should be DLC, and even with this delay, they better add a lot of new content, because I still don't think this game is worth the full amount that they're asking of people. I mean, look at Battlefield Bad Company 2 Vietnam. There's DLC done right. A massive content ad. And yeah, it's more expensive than some map packs, but it was a real expansion. A good expansion. If this Battlefield Hardline was an expansion, I'd be cool with it. I'd buy it. As it stands right now, I don't want to buy it. And I don't really care what they add, or what they say they're gonna add. EA needs to realize that if they want to delay this game, they still got to drop the price. But let's talk about the delay itself. I was genuinely surprised. And I'm sure many of you agree with me. I was just scratching and was like, wait, really? This is a joke, isn't it? EA delaying a game? No, never. EA would never delay a game. And does that not tell EA something? That people are genuinely shocked that EA would delay a game in order to make sure that it's better. I mean, repeat that in your mind. Oh wow, I'm surprised that this company would delay their game to make sure that it's better. I thought they'd care more about the money. EA, does that not tell you something? Unfortunately, it sucks that they're still not going to delay The Sims to add those features in that I wanted and that a lot of people were asking for. I mean, I'm glad that they delayed this game. I'm hoping that it means EA's going to change, but they've said they're going to change a lot of times before and haven't done it. I'm just interested in seeing when Battlefield Hardline comes out and what things they're going to add to it to make it actually worth our while. Because they've still got a long way to go if they want to get a purchase from me and many other people for that game. You know, I am so tired of developers trying to say that 30 frames per second is okay for games, and that it's acceptable, or that it's better than 60 frames per second. For me, racing games in particular must run at 60 frames per second, which is why, along with microtransactions and that frame rate cap, I'm not going to be buying Driveclub, but the director of the game obviously thinks differently to me. The game director of Driveclub made a statement that oozes bullshit, so let's see what he has to say. I can see why players assume that a higher frame rate means better quality, because in pretty much every other technical statistic, the higher numbers directly translate to better performance and more detail. Yeah, basically that's right, buddy. But he continues, with high frame rates, you've got to sacrifice a lot of detail, and ultimately, we're really satisfied that we've got a great balance of a racing game that looks stunning and plays beautifully. No, that's stupid. A lot of people got pissed off because the guys promised that Driveclub would run at 60 frames per second. And given that this game was delayed a whole year, I think a lot of us were expecting better. The developer said that 1080p 30 frames per second was absolutely the best thing for the game. The best thing. Jesus Christ. I don't understand. I think what's disheartening is that this is coming from the mouth of a developer who should know better. I mean, this guy probably does know that he knows that that games running at 60 frames per second is better. He has to know. Because it's so simple. To say that your game runs great at 30 frames per second is just an outright lie, because I can't play games that run at 30 frames per second very well. I don't find them particularly fun. This is one of the biggest problems I had with Destiny, which, you know, it's a competitive shooter, so you want it to run at 60 frames per second. 30 frames per second is acceptable in some circumstances, but for racing games, I can't say that's true. Could you imagine if Nintendo came out with Mario Kart and said, well, we wanted to get more graphics on the screen, so we're going to compromise the gameplay experience to make it look better? Honestly, I don't care about the graphics if they compromise the frame rate. If they look awful, then yeah, maybe, but at the same time, if you're needing to compromise your frame rate for graphical fidelity, you've got your priorities mixed up. Ultimately, when you're a game maker, the most important thing should be making sure that the game plays at its best, and no game plays better at 30 frames per second than at 60 frames per second. It doesn't happen. It's a lie. And I think the problem here is that we've got Sony, who know that a lot of people only care about graphics, and we've seen them just keep drumming this up all year. I mean, even at their E3 conference, they're like, games will look better on the PlayStation 4. I don't care if they look better. I want them to play better. That's what matters. Does the game run well? No? Well, then that's not good enough. I'm glad that Naughty Dog is one of the few first-party developers with Sony who seem to be looking at 60 frames per second and saying, that's the way we should go. They said that they're targeting 60 frames per second for Uncharted 4. That's great. But all these other developers don't seem to give a shit. We've got Ready at Dawn. 30 frames per second plays better for the Order 1886 than 60. Which is a head scratcher. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't work that way. And now we've got the developers of Driveclub saying, yeah, no, this is the best balance. 1080p and 30 frames per second. Seriously. If the PS4, which is supposedly the most powerful console, and apparently the Order 1886, could only run on PlayStation 4 hardware, I really am worried about this generation. The console's already getting tapped out at this point. I mean, what is going on? You can't even get 60 frames per second in a racing game that, according to early impressions from people, doesn't even look that much better than a lot of other racing games. I mean, look at Forza 5. I'm pretty sure that game ran at 60 frames per second. That game still looked good. It'll look great, it'll look good. Nobody cares if the game doesn't look that good. You're making a racing game. You should be aiming for 60 frames per second, and you shouldn't be damage controlling 30 frames per second. Especially when you promised to people last year that you were going to get it at 60 frames per second. Do you know what happened to the last game that people were expecting 1080p 60 from? That was Watch Dogs. Because Ubisoft said it was going to run like that. And then looked at how the game turned out for people. Seriously, if you really care about making the best gameplay experience possible, you gotta bump down the graphics. Oh no, you gotta bump down the graphics. Who cares? And then get the frame rate up to 60. Because unlike what this developer's saying, you have faster response times. Things look better on screen. A game that's running at 10 frames per second and looks amazing looks worse than a game that looks okay at 60 frames per second. It's smoother. It's simple. Come on, guys. Use your brains. That's it for System Update this week. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a good one.